Welcome to our Insights Executive Roundtable today. I do hope you are all fine and full of energy, no matter what time of day it is for you. We today have a big group of executive level participants. Some are still joining, representing Insights organizations from all over the globe. Today, we like to take on a topic that is actually a quite beefy topic. It is about how insights, decisions, and growth are connected, and how insights organizations can help create organizational capabilities. But before we dive into things, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Stefan Ropers, and I'm the CEO of Market Logic and your host for today's session. A little bit about myself. I'm an engineer by training. My 25-year professional experience is in growth and innovation leadership mostly. I have held senior leadership positions in mainly tech at companies such as McKinsey, Microsoft, Adobe, and Amadeus. During my career, I lived in many countries and thus was able to enjoy the world from different perspectives. On the personal side, I'm a father of 3 and an avid cyclist, as you will see, and I joined Market Logic at the beginning of this year, attracted by the opportunity I see in our space. So in terms of tackling a multifaceted topic that I just introduced, I would like to position this session as a joint learning journey versus providing all the answers. So I think we want to keep it as interactive as technology allows it to be. This is about joint learning. 2 things in terms of housekeeping. Please use Zoom's Q&A function to submit your questions throughout the entire session. We will look at those, and our magic moderators will pick them up and help weave them into the session. And if you just would like to make a comment, please use the Zoom chat function, which is also at the top of your screen. After my 20-minute keynote, we will hear leading insights leaders' perspectives around the topic in our panel. And in the last 20 minutes of our session, we will have an open Q&A. So aside from welcoming you, I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our panel. I'm excited and thankful to have them with us today. And we really have high-profile insights leaders from the middle of you, from various industries, with Christian Niederauer, the Director of Strategic Insights and Consumer Affairs Europe at Colgate-Palmolive, Paola Vacchini, Director Consumer Insights and Analytics Europe at Mondelez, and Stuart McGown, Head of Marketing and Insights and Analytics at Philips. So this is a lead group from the middle of this community, and I think we will have an interesting discussion. They will show and introduce themselves later as we open the panel after the keynote. So as I shared in the intro, the topic of growth will be with us throughout this session. And I think it's an important topic, something the CEO is interested in. And I'd like to start with an analogy from cycling, which at the surface looks like an individual sport, but in reality, it isn't. Professional cycling teams are rather complex organizations now. They strive to drive growth in the form of consistently strong race results, which then attracts the kind of eyeballs that sponsors want to see, which then justifies an annual budget, which often is a double-digit million number. So these are small enterprises, if you will, and professional cycling teams nowadays can be 30 to 40 professionals in size. There's the cyclists at the core, but then there's physicians, there's nutritionists, there's coaches, there's strategists, and there's mechanics, cooks, PR, marketing, you name it. The list almost doesn't stop. Roles are highly specialized, as the titles already say, and increasingly become very data and insights driven. So the team's outcome hinges on good cross-team coordination, but also on the individual decision of team members which, if they're good decisions, frequently are made with good insights. So a little story from a race that happened almost 2 weeks ago, the Paris-Roubaix monument race, 270 kilometers, leading all the way from Paris to Roubaix over cobblestones. A mechanic in the Suda Lotto team made the decision to use different tires than other teams did. And the whole Lotto team had to drop out of the race because they had punctures. So instead of riding broad tubeless tires, he used tires with tubes. And so the decision that this mechanic made, which I'm sure didn't make him feel well in the aftermath, was not driven by insights in the way we would have wanna see that. Similarly, a well thought out team strategy can win you races. So setting up the right combination of individual riders, team efforts, technology, and so on. So it can go both ways, but the point is growth for these teams is the collective outcome of organizations making aligned and winning decisions, hopefully based on insights. So how do they do that? So the chart you're looking at is one of the frameworks trying to link outcomes of organizations to certain behaviors. And it's clear that there's different versions of that, but this one of the brand learning growth drivers research report, I liked a lot because it basically says organizations have to be nimble and empowered. They need to apply conscious speed. They need to collaborate well, be curious and courageous. They need to cultivate their talent. They need to show commitment, and they need to be aligned on the outcome they want to drive. And that outcome in this case is customer centricity. In the case of cycling, was those race results. But in order to support all of these behaviors, I like to think that there needs to be constant communication and alignment. And I like to think that insights can support and even fuel these behaviors that drive growth and support these behaviors to enable decision-making at all levels. So what if your organization, if my organization showed all of these behaviors and we were consistently fueled by insights? So these decisions were made with better context and data today, but also with data about the future. So likely the growth outcome, however you want to define it, would be better. And I think that's the point. Conversely, if your organization lack these behaviors and insights fueling it, we see examples of what can happen in the press, in annual results calls, and in customer feedback. We can miss growth opportunities. I think we've all experienced that. We can become less attractive to our customers and lose revenue in the extreme. Increasingly, we can lose our reputation and experience costly and lasting damage to it. For example, if we ship faulty products that afterwards have to be called back or create experiences that don't drive loyalty. So how do we counteract these costs and risks? Very simply said, we put our human capital or our people on steroids, and we equip them with the insights they need to make better decisions. So it's about the effectiveness of our human talent. We have to believe that better insights enable faster and better decisions that ultimately then benefit the customer and lead to growth. And of course, in the iteration, it creates new insights from customer and intimacy and engagement that can be leveraged, hopefully then creating a flywheel of improvement and innovation. So what is in the way of this beautiful world of better decisions? Well, the reality seems to be a paradox. While we have ever more data and knowledge available, the ability of business decision makers to decide has decreased. You see that with a blue line. And that is for numerous reasons. One key issue is that the rate of change we experience in our roles, in our jobs every day is on the rise. In some industries where disruption has taken a foothold, this increased rate is not linear anymore, but it's exponential. Another reason is that decision makers are overwhelmed with the information they receive and literally don't see the forest for the tree anymore, which then leads to cherry picking and information bias. So how can we address this paradox or this challenge? In our belief, an organization's ability to make winning decisions is a function of actionable insights being available at scale. So the formula is winning decisions at scale is a function of insight, reach, and actionability. So generating an insight is the starting point only. It being democratized and thus reaching decision makers is the next level of, or the next condition of success. But we also require actionability of these insights to solve for the challenge we have just seen. So let's break it down into these elements, starting with reach. A typical challenge we see in our customer base is that insights organizations lack the capacity to really achieve reach all by themselves. In house of brands type of setups, we see a 1-to-10 relationship between insights and analytics experts and business decision makers. So the leverage is a little bit more favorable, or the mix, the ratio a little bit more favorable. In branded houses, this ratio increases to 1 to 100. And I'm sure you all see these resource constraints. So a first step to achieve reach is optimizing the process of serving the requests coming in from the business, which is typically pretty reactive and manual in terms of process. The next step then is for the insights organization to become a more automated, proactive service provider to the business side and to sub-segments of decision makers within it. And then the first step into the democratization of insights potentially yields already big returns in terms of both operational efficiency and increased effectiveness. And that is only the starting point by bringing more insights to more people through technology. And that can already have a strong impact in the sense of driving alignment, collaboration, increased customer centricity, as L'Oreal puts it here. Julia Sahi saying that it was important for them to make knowledge accessible to anyone, so democratization. And the objective was to fuel customer centricity across the group. So alignment and then enabling everyone to use this information to innovate, to develop their products. And these democratized insights light up, or in other words, help activate the growth behaviors we talked about in the beginning, those 7 ones. And at L'Oreal, this approach has already enabled customer centricity and product innovation in a better way. It has become an enabler of the growth strategy execution in that sense, but that's not the end game. That's not sufficient. So if democratization did allow us to take a first step, the second step is what we call actionability. So what is actionability in simple terms? So first of all, it is composed of alignment, which means the insight we provide is closely linked to business goals, strategic initiatives, and decision scenarios. So it basically is linked to the levers the business has in its hands, the decision maker can control. So that's alignment. There's context to provide richness of information, allowing to assess why the insight is important. So context needs to be there with data points to make sense. And then there's relevance, which means the insight is a strong signal for an individual, for a specific decision maker, for a role, while it may be just noise for someone else. So this is about being more role-based, more targeted, more maybe personalized. And then there are attributes like specificity, novelty, clarity, that speak more for themselves, and also determine actionability. So what is the takeaway here? While technology can help achieve actionability at scale, insights organizations need to be closely aligned with the strategy of the company to achieve accountability. So this business partnership is extremely key to reach this actionability. So I want to give an example here as well, where a European retail chain achieved actionability actually for some really important decision that was being made, triggered by a key insight available to the right decision makers at the right time. This led to an accelerated entry into an emerging market that was very competitive and still is very competitive. And the foundation here was a very close connection between the business and the insights organization, and of course, the underlying technology to make this happen in real time. So I'd like to now bring my thoughts together a little bit and wrap it up. We believe that driving growth requires insights teams to very closely collaborate with the business in what we call an infinity loop. You could call it whatever. It's an iterative, collaborative kind of process. In this infinity loop, a highly productive and technologically enabled insights organization engages the business in a very collaborative kind of way, supporting with sense making and curation to, of course, achieve the actionability. The business can easily use and apply these insights to support better decisions and constantly provides feedback to improve the deliverables of the insights organization. If a sustainable infinity loop like that could be put in place in a partnership with the business, the organization, in our view, is laying some foundation for a new business capability, improving decision-making, which in turn should support growth, which, as I want to emphasize again, is the theme of this keynote. So I'd like to close a set of ideas to keep in mind as you think about your insight strategy. This is our view from lots of customer interactions and learning over the years. I'm totally certain that this will evolve, but the first point is be a strategy-aligned service provider. Have this service provider mindset, be very closely aligned with the corporate and the business strategy. It is the foundation for achieving this actionability. Second, ensure that you achieve reach and actionability of insights at scale. This will require a strong technology partner like ourselves, will be helpful to achieve this, to support with the right technology so this can be scaled out. Reach and actionability doesn't come at prohibitive costs. And then lastly, drive super strong collaboration with the business stakeholders, collaborate and engage very closely, have that understanding of your stakeholder map to build this decision capability. And I think it's clear from these 3 points that this is not first and foremost a technology problem. I think it is about the role of the insights organization, the aspiration of the insights organization, being a servant leader and a transformational influence in your organization to build this capability. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention and now switch gears and move ahead to our panel discussion, which will last roughly 5 minutes. Please continue to use the Zoom Q&A and chat function to submit your questions. We will look at that. And Christian, Paola, and Stuart, may I ask you to switch on your video and show yourself so we can have a virtual face-to-face. All right. So thanks again for joining us. And like I think we covered a lot of ground in the last 20 minutes. try to make this connection between growth, decisions, and insights. And I'd like to hear maybe your view, Christian, on what your perspective on the connection between insights, decisions, and growth is.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Stefan, for asking the question. Also, thank you for having me. So I think it's a pretty straightforward connection from my point of view. So first, I mean, an insight is usually there to really make a decision better or easier. So therefore, there's a clear kind of connection between the insight driving the decision-making process. And then, of course, better decisions will also lead to more growth in the company. So therefore, insights have an indirect impact on the overall growth for sure. And that's also when I was joining Colgate-Palmolive 2 years ago, I was also asked, well, what's my view for insights for the future and how do I see insights? And then we put together kind of as a team a mission statement. We're pretty clear from the start that we had in there that basically we are there to provide the right information at the right time to everyone, because we really believe that any function or any person that makes a decision in a company can make a better decision if they have the right information. Therefore, that's what we strive for with direct interaction with our networks, but also with systems like from market logic and so on to democratize insights, because we can't be all the time everywhere and with everyone.
Okay. And Paola, what types of decisions do you see as being supported by such insights, like in the realm of growth or whatever you see at Mondelez?
Hello, everybody, and I'm really glad to be here with you today. And thank you for the question, Stefan. Well, if we look a little bit into the type of decisions that we are enabling in insights, I have to say they are everywhere, right? So they can inform from mergers and acquisitions to portfolio choices to capital investment, going to brand strategy, brand activation, and even, influencing how we build our strategies with our customers and we develop our joint business plans. So actually they span across, I would say, the end-to-end of our organization. This is why I think, also Christian was mentioning it, this is super critical that we really are aligned in the way we think with the decisions that the companies, have to make and the type of decisions which are needed in the different aspects. One reflection that I was sharing with you, Stefan, at some point, and I think, I'm more than happy to share with the rest of this team, is also a little bit of a reflection about not necessarily on which decision we are taking every day, but how decisions are made. And in my experience in Mondelez, I have observed, 3 behaviors, which I'm trying to play back with a little bit of a provocation here. On one side, we want to be consumer-centric, but on the other side, we believe that guts can overrule the consumer feedback. I don't know how many can find themselves in this type of situation, but personally, I have found myself a few times. Secondly, we want quick and solid feedback because we know that otherwise we will make the wrong decisions. And finally, we wanted to look at data as well as empathizing with our consumers. So the way in which people are making decisions are really bringing together many different aspects. And why this is important? Because we need to understand really well how we are making decisions as much as which decisions are made if we wanted to make an impact in the organizations in which we are working.
I mean, it's fascinating what you are saying, like different groups, the how and the why. What have been the challenges in the reality of dealing with this complexity and really moving from sort of the pure democratization and like the shipping out of different things towards moving towards more of decision making, Paola? Is there anything that you have in mind?
Well, I think, it's all about, I would like, to say I have the truth, but, I think it's a continuous journey, to be honest. Mm-hmm. But I think there is a big relevance in the role that we want to play as a function in the organization. So really understanding well, what is which decisions we are influencing, why are they critical? Try to empathize also with people about how they're making decisions, and then decide what is the role we want to play. I mean, in many cases, we are not the decision makers, but we are the ones that actually influence decisions and important decisions for our companies. So there are many ways around it, and I think maybe that could be also a good topic for discussion as well, right?
Yeah, and I want to take you up on this, Paola, and encourage the folks on this call on this session to submit questions or thoughts on this, so we can weave that into the discussion. So if you have any questions to the panelists as we discuss, we will try to take that up. So I mean, it seems like there is a journey there, and if I would go to you, Stuart, and your experience at Philips, and sorry, did somebody say anything? I'm not sure. I had strange noise in my line. I apologize. So Stuart, what do you see as the challenges that decision makers face to use insight? So turning it around a little bit today.
Yeah. Now, I was struck by one of the slides that you presented, Stefan, the one where you've got this sort of exponential growth in information, and in the sort of ability of decision makers to actually get hold of the right information. And that's something we definitely see as well. And I've seen it many times. It's in the IT industry. You've got this sort of famous Moore's law, where the computing processing power is kind of doubling, the price is going down all the time. I think we're in a similar situation with insights and information. And I think as a profession, our remit is growing. I think many of us probably on the line today recognize we're bringing in analytics alongside the insights, alongside research. So there's a thirst for information, there's a thirst for interpretation of what's going out there in the world. I think within all our industries have become far more complex than they were sort of 10 or 20 years ago. So for me, I think that probably the biggest challenge is for decision makers, to find the right information, but also to get the right level of service. I mean, we at Philips, I mean, we have sort of 80,000 colleagues. There's no way that we can serve. So also, I think in your presentation, you had what's that ratio between the sort of how do you serve all of those colleagues. So I think it's a balance of how do you manage all of that information, find the right sort of insights, and to be able to do it in the right manner, have the right kind of stakeholder engagement, and at the same time make sure you're delivering a great service and great access to the insights, because without that you're going to sort of miss a sweet spot. You're never going to be able to serve everybody, but you've got to find a way to balance it and make sure you enable people to find the insights. I think that's the greatest challenge. There is so much information out there. It's how do you enable your stakeholders to get the right information at the right time, if I sum it up.
So moving on a little bit, Paola, you shared some thoughts on the role of the Insights organization, and Christian, it was also you alluding to that point. How do you view the role of Insights organizations today, and how do you see that role evolve? And what will it mean in terms of gathering support also from the product company to make that happen? So, like, what are you seeing as your roles and the kind of resources, connections and so forth that you will need. Maybe Christian first, and then also the others.
I mean, it's an interesting one, because when we look at the, I can broadly only speak for the FMCG industry, because that's what I've worked in most of my Insights life. What we've seen in the past 10 to maybe 15 years is that we just try to do the same stuff that we always did with less people and most probably also less budget, which at some point was still doable because you just got more synergies and so on, and it was all good. But we never really questioned, is that still the right organization? So we were just so focused on, okay, we just mimic the org structure of our key stakeholders. So sometimes marketing, sometimes the broader commercial organization. And if they are organized by brands, then we are organized by brands. If they're organized by countries or regions, then we are organized that way. Instead of really thinking, okay, we always, I mean, everyone uses the buzzword of people or customer centricity. But if that's really true, then the internal organization shouldn't matter at all, because it's how, then we should have more an external focus. So for me, it's really the future Insights organization needs to be structured around what really matters in market, and therefore can also be much more agile. So they can even do it then with less people, but then you can reallocate resources. Because if you then have experts in the area of people journeys, of social listening and so on, then they are not kind of going with the peaks and valleys of a specific brand team or specific regional team, but they can focus on. And if there's a big kind of promotional event in China like 11/11, then you just, or 11/11, then you just move all resources there. And nowadays you don't have to physically move people, just have them virtually joining. And then you can put the best minds on a topic that really matters for the business, rather than having somebody sitting in Australia that is a super expert in semiotics and so on, but currently there's no semiotics project in Asia Pacific. So therefore he has nothing to do, or they have nothing to do. And that's, I think, where we have to be stronger in the future, to liberate ourselves and say, if we really want to drive people centricity in companies and want to influence the key decisions, then we have to somehow elevate ourselves a bit and go a bit more across. On the other side, the big risk that is there then is usually that if you are moving away from key stakeholders in the business, then you might no longer have the seat at the table, and then you might be a bit disconnected from the day-to-day business work. And that's the fine balance, or the balance that you have to find, that you are detached enough that you can really focus on key things that matter, but on the other side, that you're still close enough and not kind of moving back to that old kind of thinking that we had. And I remember when I joined my first company, it was always like Insights or market research at that time is the independent voice of the consumer. Yeah, kind of, but we are not really, because we are hired by a company and we want to grow the business. So therefore we should put a business lens on it. If I'm just telling the business, okay, they want everything at almost no cost, okay, you can outsource that information. And that's a great idea, but it might not fit to our brand strategy. So therefore, as Insights people, we have to really understand the business. And I think Paola said that also a couple of times, and then find our best structure around it, but not just following other functions.
Makes a lot of sense, Christian. I would also think, maybe you can comment on that, or Stuart or Paola have a view that such setup that is more agile also puts higher demands on the individuals in the Insights organization to much more flexibly adapt to these kinds of situations. Would that be a true statement in your mind? Yeah,
I mean, from my point of view, fully. Happy to hear what Paola has to say, but nobody really likes change. And of course, I think in Insights, we are usually the ones that like the least change. And because I mean, it's also when you talk to senior stakeholders in the business, they always think, okay, the only thing that we're doing are focus groups and quant surveys. And some people are really happy in that because they have done that all their life, but we have to accept that we have to change. but that means, yeah, you get out of your comfort zone.
Okay. Good, Paola, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would. I completely agree, Christian. I think this is a very good thought. I was also reflecting a little bit on also a little bit on the function that Stefan was proposing in his introduction, because I believe there is a lot around organization and how we are organizing ourselves. There is an awful lot, in my view, on the type of skills that we need to develop, from a personal level and collectively as a team. So what I'm thinking about, and referring also to the type of role that I believe we should play in our organizations, or at least that I'm trying to create in our organization, is a little bit of how do we see ourselves? So what is exactly a bit more the role that we want to play? And the way I like to phrase it sometimes is that we need to search with an inquisitive mind, digest using business acumen, and synthesize for actionability. So there are three characteristics. So the capability to search, in an intelligent way, to digest in a way, and really then to synthesize and make this available to everybody in the best and easier possible way. I think these are characteristics that are not necessarily part of the resume of many people, and these are not necessarily characteristics we've been recruiting for, all the time. So I think and they will continue to change, right? So this is what I can see today, but they continuously change. So there is a little bit of attention as well, in my view, that we needed to pay to these skills, which are not soft skills, but are becoming more and more, part of what we want to be in our organizations. And this is more on a personal kind of level.
Any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what's being said. I recognise that in the sort of challenges we face at Philips. The ask of Insights teams is, as I said before, it's growing. I think it's interesting the way people are looking at that and setting up more agile teams, because again, you've got to have the depth and the discipline of being able to run the different types of methodologies to run those sorts of disciplines. But you've also, these days, you've got to be an expert in marketing. You've got to be an expert in business and have that sort of business acumen, as Paola mentioned. And you've got to be able to bridge all of these things across. It's a big ask. It's very different to the sort of role that was around when I first entered and started on my career sort of 20 odd years ago. And that does put some special challenges on a team and the way they work, the way they work with stakeholders. And I think that's a little bit of the topic for this afternoon, and seeing, well, how do you accommodate that with very, very demanding stakeholders in a very demanding kind of competitive climate. So I mean, for us at Philips, it is going towards, well, how can you sort of really make that information available? How can you leverage the expertise in different teams? I heard a very nice expression recently, wagile. So it seems to be a kind of a variation of agile, but obviously having the fact that you've got that sort of waterfall at the beginning. So there is that sort of planning, there is that sort of knowledge of how things go, but you've also built in that sort of flexibility to pivot, because it is becoming increasingly challenging for insights teams and analytics teams to handle the demands that are happening.
Okay. In the meanwhile, we got a question from Martin, who directed this at Paola. He agrees with the key competency of synthesis. How do you develop this competency in the team? So it goes back to the skills and the development of the individuals. Any thoughts on that, anyone? So
that's a good one. So I think we tried a few times, and I'm really curious also to hear the other panelists whether what's been their experience on this one. We tried a few years back with these storytelling kind of trainings and type of of programs. And to be honest with you, we felt like, yes, they were setting, the foundations and the theory, but the reality is that this is an art that we needed to develop by doing, basically. So it might seem a bit rude and simplistic, but the way we are trying to develop this within Mondelez is really leading by example and helping people. So showing, first of all, how we can synthesize. There are people who are naturally more, keener or braver in doing this, and this is something that we try to share. We coach people in their day by day. So we are asking, as an example, to really, answer the question of that specific, piece of work in one chart. We are setting up meetings in which people need to bring people to decisions in 15 minutes. So it seems a bit rude, but I think, honestly, time is one of those constraints that force people to think differently about what to focus on and what to take away and what is not necessarily needed. Mm-hmm. And then there is, again, a lot of coaching in the day by day. This is something that, this is how we are trying to help ourselves a little bit in this area, which is not an easy one, for sure.
But Christian, anything from your side?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's also a two-way street, because the key thing is very often we have these lengthy reports and lengthy presentations and even emails and so on, because the business is asking for it. It's always like, hey, show me some data that proves that and so on. So therefore, because a lot of decision makers want to make the decision on their own. So if we synthesize too many things, then we're already kind of guiding the decision, and therefore that's sometimes a bit of a pushback. Nevertheless, like Stuart said before, time is a limiting factor at the moment in the bottleneck. So therefore, everyone should be really embracing that we make it easier for everyone, and that's why I usually say, okay, it can't happen from one day to the other. So we have to build that trust over time, and therefore, instead of like we did in the past, okay, there's that recommendation, and here are all the reasons why I made that recommendation. Just give the recommendation even to the most senior person in the business and see what happens. And funny enough, very often we saw that people said in a meeting, okay, then we go that direction. Or they answered in the mail, okay, clear, I think we are clear now about our decision. And then people were really surprised that they didn't ask me for data. And I said, okay, but yeah, you need to have it in the background because somebody might ask for it. But just try to look at all the information available. And now we have the time where we have more than enough information on everything. Make your conclusion, present it as a recommendation to the business, and then see what happens. And if then are questions, then you can deliver additional information. If not, then we can all move on, and we saved us a lot of time.
I mean, one of I've got two further thoughts to add on the conversation. I mean, one of the things that we noticed is we have a need to set up a role as a business partner. So somebody that's really, and I think Paola and Christian, you're alluding to the same sort of thing, to really be close to your business decision makers and really understand them and really sort of tie the dots together and give a very sort of deep level of insights that are really aligned with the sort of business problems. At the same time, we also see there's a huge need of information and insights. Now, those business partners can't possibly service all of the questions that are out there. So, and that sort of brings you on to the sort of second conclusion is how do you design your stakeholder engagement model? Because you can't serve the entire organization. That's sometimes hard, because I think many people, at least I've come across in my career, many people in Insights are very service minded. We're very keen to show what we can do, how to help. And sometimes that can get us into trouble because you can't please everybody in an organization. You've got to be fairly clear on who are you serving, who are the decision makers, what is the impact you want to generate, and to focus on that. but you've also got to create means to enable all of the other stakeholders to get a hold of the insights and the information that they need as well. So for me, that's why the two go hand in hand. Focusing on the real stakeholders with a sort of a business partner type of model, and at the same time find ways to really democratize information, get it into the hands of people at scale. Otherwise, as I say, you can find yourself in a difficult place if you're leading a team, trying to serve everybody.
And I think, Stuart, you just answered Rebecca's question that we got in somehow. Rebecca, it would be nice if you could indicate whether Stuart just did that or whether we need to come back to this one later. So with so many stakeholders to be served and the need to get the right insights to the right people, how do you make sure that the service you're delivering is still relevant to all of these groups? That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Awesome. There's also agreement from Saab here with regards to the synthesis skill. And he asked a particular question. I just pulled this forward, Paola, since you talked about this, and Christian, you talked about this. He asks whether agencies that they work with, partners and agencies, for the most part, also would require these skills. And often these skills are not existent there. They're not existent in our own organizations yet. So have you come across best-in-class partners that are good at that so far in your experience?
Okay, so I don't believe I'm going to mention anybody right now, but I agree on the fact that these skills are not necessary. This skill of synthesis is not necessarily at the core of people doing research. Okay, so we find exactly the same issue in many of our suppliers. We still receive reports made of hundreds of pages in some cases when we have most complex kind of studies. And that's where, I think, to be honest, yes, there are people who are a bit better than others, but the way we are trying to, there is a I would say, an education process that has to happen, in many different places. And this is also a matter on how we dedicate our time, right? And one of the things that, that we are trying to do actually is to bring our suppliers to synthesize more. So giving them access to the context in which we are operating, to the right be very focused on the type of question that we want to answer, to be very clear about what we already know and doesn't have to be repeated, and what is new and needs to be called out in that specific context. I think this is a little bit of help that sometimes they need, and the more they go and the more they learn, and we are improving collectively. So to be honest, my team is still checking, the reports before, in case we present reports. In many cases, we decided not to present anymore, as an example. So we use those meetings just to synthesize the key insights, and then we dedicate maybe 1 hour for the discussion and not to present. So we are not presenting anymore, but we are actually just, starting the conversation in those meetings.
Okay, there was a similar question from Giselle as well around this. I want to pull us up a little bit again and get back to something that I wanted to ask Stuart, and it's sort of back to the roots of the presentation. Like, is supporting business decisions at scale the right kind of objective for the future? Like, sort of this North Star for insights organizations? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, completely, because I mean, if you think back to that, as I said, that sort of image where you got that sort of Moore's law, that sort of exponential increase in information, data, insights, you've got to be able to handle that, and you've got to be able to handle what comes with it, which is a sort of growing complexity and growing number of questions you're getting from your stakeholders. they are getting overloaded with information and data, and they need help. They need some, and I think that's an expertise that we in the sort of insights and analytics profession offer. They need somebody to help interpret that. But of course, we're caught in the same situation because it's impossible to answer everything. It is impossible to answer everything. So we need to find a way, as I said before, you focus on the big impact questions, which comes from having a very close dialogue with your leadership, being very much in step with what they're thinking, which allows you to sort of influence them because you're close to them. You understand what's on their mind, and it gives you an open door to sort of bring to them your thoughts, your ideas. But at the same time, you've got to have a mechanism where you can actually deliver insights at scale, because at the same time, there are many colleagues, many stakeholders who you can't serve in that personal way. You've got to enable that. So for us, the way we're looking at it, we're sort of trying to become very process driven, or to identify at least types of research in different stages of certain key processes. And we're trying to align, and we're trying to almost segment our insights into ways that are meaningful, which means you can scale it up. You can say, when we're talking about value proposition creation, the ideation, let's make it those sorts of insights available in that sort of area, as opposed to, let's say, further down the funnel, whether it's activation or it's evaluating performance. We make sure that those sorts of things are clustered together, and they're sort of fed into the process at the right stage. And I think that's going to become increasingly important. I'm looking at some of the products, and of course I cover everything from healthcare to consumer, and every product and innovation that Philips has is going to be connected in the future. So the amount of data and analytics that will be at our fingertips is it's just growing exponentially. So I don't think we have a choice. We have to scale up the way we deliver our insights. It's inevitable, in my view.
And to all of you, creating this business relationship and sort of grooming it, evolving it, it must start somewhere, maybe with a little thing that bootstraps it, some initial project, and then grow. What are the experiences of putting that in place? So aside from the stakeholder map that you talked about and the prioritization of who to go to, how do you get started, and what are some of the challenges that you've encountered?
Yeah, I think having a very clear idea of what you're trying to achieve first and foremost, because if you set off on your journey, you're shaping the sort of engagement model of how you are going to deliver insights, how you're going to deliver impact. If you haven't got that clarity in your mind and in your plan from day one, you're always going to be on the receiving end of a lot of requests that you're just not going to be able to handle. So it's a bit like when you first set up any kind of strategy, like a data strategy. You always work about, okay, what's the impact I want to have? What are the key areas? What are the big buckets that I really want to focus on? And then sort of work your way back and almost design, how are you going to approach your whole sort of insights and analytics strategy? And that sort of goes right the way through the value chain. So going from, at the beginning, you will obviously then start looking at how do you gather and store and synthesize, but also it's the other elements we've been discussing over the last sort of 30 minutes or so. How do you influence? How do you get a sort of a feedback loop going so that you don't miss vital bits of feedback where you may need to adjust and pivot? That's what I would start with, and be very, very clear on that and on what you're trying to achieve. That would be my sort of starting off point, developing that North Star.
And that puts another onus on the talent that we have in place, right? We want them to synthesize, we want them to be agile, we want them to be influential. So sort of we raise the bar pretty significantly, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a wonderful time to be part of the insights and analytics industry. I've heard at various, conferences, people sort of talking about, do we have a seat at a table? Well, if you engage with your senior stakeholders, you understand What do they need? What's keeping them awake at night? You'll see very clearly how you can help them, how you can make an impact. And if you focus on that, I mean, your career and your team will flourish. Because which executive doesn't want to have that sort of edge with getting great quality insights and analytics? And that's really key. But as I said, I think the trap that I've seen, and I've fallen into it myself over the years several times, you can very easily fill in your entire week answering questions for people that may not be aligned with your company's strategy or with your executive's line of thinking. And I think if you keep yourself busy, it doesn't mean you're good busy, I guess is a way of thinking about it. If you can be close to those senior decision makers, you'll find that you will be good busy. You'll be making impact, you'll be appreciated, you'll be applauded. But you've got to also be willing to say no, or find a mechanism where you serve all of the other stakeholders who will naturally knock on your door. They'll want your services, because we live in a world where there is so much information and insights. Our consumers, our industries we work in are getting more complex, and people need that sort of understanding to know what are the right decisions to be made. They need us.
Very good. Paola, you had a thought?
Well, just to build probably on what Stuart was saying, I think there is a shift that we are that you are describing here, which I find one of the fundamental shifts that we need to have with our stakeholders, which is the shift from reacting to anticipate. And what you are describing, the fact of understanding your stakeholders' needs, and being able, to me, the magic is when you are able to anticipate what the next question is going to be, what they would need in order to tackle that. And this, to me, is something which comes, with the experience and, and with, working on a day by day and being in those conversations. But I believe it's also a bit of it allows us to really plan a bit more. How we can make an impact. You don't need to react in the moment, but you can figure out a little bit more, how do I structure my role, my support, and my contribution to this specific issue. So it's a little bit of a change that sometimes it's a bit hard to push on people, but I believe it can be really a bit magic. Yeah.
Magic is a great word in this context. Christian, any thoughts on how to build and maintain these ties to the business that we've been talking about? Any thoughts?
I think, very often it comes down to the individual, because it's difficult to get that as a kind of a credit for the whole function. As a function, you definitely have to raise your business acumen and the business IQ, because that's, I think what I also mentioned earlier was a bit of the issue in the past, that we always said, okay, we have the only truth, and then you have to make sense out of it and then translate that into kind of a business action. But that's no longer true, because if you really want to influence decisions and help the companies to grow and to flourish, then we have to understand what's happening with their insight. What is the impact of us saying, okay, this is not working in market, or this price point doesn't fit. So therefore, that's where we have to start with, because otherwise we will always be seen as, okay, yeah, there are these guys that know a lot about the market and about people, but they don't know how to do business. So therefore, I will take whatever they say and then I will make something out of it. So that's why, for me, maintaining or even establishing that strong relationship is by showing that we are interested in understanding what's happening with these insights, and also how does the business work. So that's why, I always, whenever I joined a new company and so on, I always try to understand all the processes from innovation, but even kind of supply chain and so on. And in addition, also understand the P&L. So if you don't understand the finance behind it, it's also difficult to really make an accurate recommendation. And then I think what Stuart also said, that the wrong way is by answering all the questions that come in, because then you are just like a service provider, and you will never get that real eye-to-eye business relationship or an eye-level business relationship. So therefore, you have to choose the right ones, but not burning bridges on the way. So by just not answering when people are asking questions, also not the right thing, but tell them that you can't answer it, but then maybe also guide them to say, okay, if that's really a burning thing and you need additional information, here's an information resource, here's a report, here's something that you can do. So giving, and that's back to democratization, what Paola mentioned before. I think now we have so many capabilities and tools available that we can avoid answering this question all day.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Thanks, Stuart and Paola. I want to switch gears once more and get to sort of my last assertion that I made, that this is ultimately about building a capability across the organization. We talked about the partnership between the Insights organization and the business alignment, the actionability, and so on. But there's so much more to really transform the organization, to use the data. Paola, you said that in the beginning. There's elements of driving change across the enterprise to make that happen. So what does building a capability entail, and what can the Insights organization do, and what help will it need from elsewhere, like, for example, the CMO as sort of the chief growth officer or the CEO to make it happen?
Well, I can start maybe. As you said, this transformation implies usage of different technologies, different tools, different ways to look into the data and to democratize them across the organization. It's not only this, but this is a part of it. What I have experienced, and this is something I think we need to resist a little bit to do, is that we are very much into launching stuff rather than deploying capabilities. Yeah, and this is where I think this is not just about insights and analytics. I think it's a bit of a price to pay, if you want, in the digital transformation that I think we are living, all together. But I think this can be a big mistake. So we need to be aware of this. There is no doubt that we need to have tools, that we need to launch them and to make them available to everybody. But what I think is really important is that we pay attention to the change management piece. So yes. What does have to happen so that people are adopting in their everyday life these new capabilities and tools, and being very open and transparent to get the feedback, to understand what's working, what's not working, improve them, going into this mindset of, I would say, customer centricity also in this aspect, and our capability to receive feedback and to go into this continuous improvement kind of approach. I think this is a little bit the tension that sometimes I see and I observe, and I believe I've seen too many cases in which we are just launching stuff and they're landing nowhere, because actually there is no change management attached to it and no change in the mindset. And in this also senior management have their responsibility, because this is about really ensuring that whatever we do has a very clear destination in mind.
Gentlemen, any addition to that on the transformational and change management aspect?
I mean, the key thing is whenever we approach change, and that's not only for Insights, but for everyone, it's like we're moving from one state to the next state. And I think as the future is evolving so fast and everything is changing so quickly, we have to get used to the fact that it's just a continuous change. There is no now and tomorrow. There's always kind of continuous learning, new capabilities, new tools, and so on. And that's what we have to accept, and then also really make that our day-to-day kind of business to always think about continuous improvement. I mean, that concept is kind of, I don't know how old it is, but I learned it in university from the Japanese kind of car manufacturer. So it's like basically you have to constantly ask yourself, is that still the right tool? Is that still the right way how to do business? And if not, then also don't be reluctant to change and change fast, and evolve things over time, because what might be the best way to do things today might no longer be the best way tomorrow, and then you have to slowly change it and adapt to it. And with that, you're moving away from this, okay, now we waited too long, now we need a transformation or revolution, and have just a constant evolution. So you're changing and making every day a bit better, and then you don't even realize that you are somewhere completely different than 5 years ago, because the tool, the capabilities, the people evolved with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me on the sort of change and transformation, I think in the slide deck you had this sort of infinite loop, and I think that's probably, and I think Christian, you said it quite nicely there as well. It's not a kind of a from and to. It's not a start and a finish. It's always changing and evolving. So I think the first thing to do is to recognize that that's the situation we all live in today. And the most important part is to bring people along with you. So aligning with, create a line of sight with where your company, what is a marketing strategy, what's a business strategy, to make sure that people recognize that connection. But also just to, in that infinite loop, just keep the dialogue going at all of those different sort of touch points. And I think the only other build I'd have is just to pace yourself, is recognize you're running a marathon. It's not like some sort of 100-meter sprint where you're starting and then you're changing and you're finishing. I don't think that world exists anymore. I think it's just it's an infinite change loop that we're in, and it's a continuous sort of evolution that we're on.
Very good. So in the interest of time, I suggest that we switch to our Q&A discussion. We have a couple of questions here that I try to group a little bit and direct to the panelists. I will try to weave in remarks that I received as well. So there's an interesting question from Martin here. How you reduce or avoid growing numbers of contradictory insights in the process of scaling? So first of all, maybe like, is this a real problem that you guys are seeing as well? And how can it be addressed in your view?
Yeah, and maybe I can start. So I think it is getting more and more of a problem because of the more data points or more data sources available. Because in the past, when you only had one study, or you only had one kind of tracking for brand health and so on, was quite easy. And then you had an insight, and some people liked it, some people didn't like it, but there was only one point of truth, or one truth there. Now you have, if you just take the example of brand health, you have a brand health tracking system, you have social listening, you have it in a lot of other studies, you ask these questions, you have consumer affairs data and so on, you have syndicated research like the Brand Z study and so on. So you have a lot of things, and that of course will create sometimes different insights or contradicting insights. The key for us to manage, and that's what we have to do, is to define what is the right source for a specific question, and then make sure that this source is prioritized. And then whenever somebody comes with, yeah, but I read this in that report, and said it doesn't matter for that, because we decided if it's related to brand health, that's our key source. So instead of in the past where naturally you only had one source, now we have to define which is the right one. And in addition to, I think I also saw that from Frank, so colleague at Colgate, we also have to make sure that whenever we have answers to specific business questions, put that into one central share platform and one location, because then it's there. And then if we direct people there, they will all see the same answer to the same question.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, one of the ways we see it as well, I mean, one of the ways we try and package the information together in areas that answers certain groups and types of business questions. So, I mean, if we think about the sort of market logic area, I mean, we create these sort of knowledge zones. So we try and group it together, and it's aligned around a specific type of question. So we sort of take control of the communication of the insights, because otherwise, I mean, you can get yourself into a situation where you're chasing answers to statistical noise. Where a couple of different studies, maybe it's just a slightly different sampling, had a different objective. And again, that can keep you in that sort of wrong busy kind of zone. And if you can package it together, understand the business question and say, here's the knowledge zone, here's that area that just, it gives you the kind of answer or the insights into that area where you need to make decisions. It just helps remove a lot of that sort of contradictory noise that you might be chasing.
Yes, I fully agree. I was also thinking about, how we are using the knowledge zones, to create that common ground that can go across all the different stakeholders. And I also believe that, the more we can use good practices or same methodologies, in specific areas, the easier it becomes, right? So if we give access to people to use, many different tools in order to do what somebody is supposed to do the job, and we are not, harmonized in the way we operate, I think this is creating additional noise that sometimes, it's there. And sometimes, there is another very small thing, which I believe is sometimes can become super important, is the taxonomy. So we talk about, brand health, I think you were saying, Christian, but what exactly do we mean by that? Because, the same name can be, the same thing has the same name, but actually it can contain a completely different meaning according to the source of information we are looking at. So also having clarity about when we talk about brand health, what is this? How do we measure it? And do we do it consistently across all our businesses and brands? Those are important points in my view.
Thanks, Paola. So Randolph asks here, what are some practical examples of how your platform has supported speed to insight? So I guess this question goes a little bit to me, and then maybe if you want to add to it, of course, you're welcome to. But Randolph, I think we would need to sort of understand your situation better, but in principle, a platform allows to organize vast amounts of insights and distribute them in a targeted way to different target audiences within the organization, curating them. And so it's technically enabling both the reach and the actionability of the insights, as we put it. And practical examples would be decisions to make about competitive moves, as I outlined, decisions on how to message a campaign or other product and innovation decisions. I think the list is probably endless, and it would most likely be helpful if we reached out to you, understood your situation a little better, and gave you a more targeted answer. Stuart, Christian, anything? Paola, if like, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I can share with you a couple of examples. I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, we used to have something like 5 or 6 different knowledge management platforms at Philips. So we actively actually hid our information in 5 or 6 different areas before we sort of aligned and said, right, let's put it all in one place. Which was the first step. That was a major step, and we chose market logic. The other area is, making it searchable. So having a very powerful search engine. So that helps speed up people finding the right kind of insights and documents. I think being able to set up the knowledge zone. So we start to align these knowledge zones with key processes within Philips. So again, it means you can serve people, you can make it easier for people to find what they want. But you also have this sort of AI built in, and we're serving quite a broad, I mean, we have many propositions in our consumer portfolio, and many different sorts of questions, but we've also got, you know, a lot of very different markets, like on the healthcare side of our business. So, but everybody is using the same platform. And I think it's really important that you allow your stakeholders to find their information fast and to find it in a format that suits them. So that I mean, there are a couple of areas which have really helped us speed up, you know, the sort of insight. And we've got a lot of ideas of how we can sort of further build on that in the future as well.
And also very practical example. I mean, if you're in a global business, then there's a question coming up at late afternoon in the US, then usually your colleagues in Asia and Europe are just either at dinner or in bed already. Therefore, you have to wait until the next day. But the next day, then you when you start, it's already half day gone for the other two groups again. So therefore, now if I have a question about a specific piece of research, do we have something on a new campaign that was just launched globally? Do we already have from Latin America the first kind of results? I just go to our knowledge management system from called DIG from Market Logic, and then you just find it there. It's much easier. And then if you have questions, yes, you can still ask people the questions, but at least that first barrier of, okay, is there anything available, you can immediately remove because you can just check it in the system.
Thank you.
I can add maybe another example. When we created this platform with Market Logic, we have asked all our teams, you know, to ensure that every time they receive a request for a new project, we always start from what we already know. Because I think we are all experiencing this, especially, you know, in big corporates, that actually the same question comes again and again and again over time, and typically people are restarting again and again and again each time. So really the willingness to go and understand what do we already have and start from there and trying to fill the gaps of what we don't know yet. I think it's a bit of a investment of time at the very beginning, but it's a lot of time saved, you know, afterwards. And sometimes it prevents us from doing stuff because we realize that we already know what we need to know.
So with the next one, I summarize Giselle, who was very active. Thank you, Giselle, and Rebecca's question. It has to do with stakeholder management and the discussion we had on synthesis. So I think the question between the two is probably what's a good step to start towards more effective stakeholder communication. I would assume it's business stakeholder communication. So how can this be bootstrapped in the beginning?
Maybe I can start with a couple of views. I think finding the right kind of people for the role as a business partner is critically important, because it's not, at least in my experience, it's not something for everybody. It's quite a specialist skill set in terms of communication, in terms of listening ability, in terms of, you know, and as Paola was saying, anticipating what's going on there if you get to a level of understanding the business. So recruiting the right profile of people. I mean, in our team, and I saw another question, I haven't had time to type in an answer, but, you know, what are the kind of skill sets? I mean, in our team, we have a data analytics team, we have a data science team, we've got business intelligence, we have got knowledge management. We actually have a small team looking after that for us, competitive insights, we've got brand and customer experience, we have proposition insights, and we have business partners. But we recognize that there are people out there that are very skilled, and if you give them the room to focus, they'll do a great job on that area. But business partnering is where you need somebody to look across, and that's a special skill set in able to do the read across what's happening, join the dots, and to engage actively with your stakeholders and to align with them. I think for me, that's probably one of the most important aspects, is to hire the right profile and give them the support to grow. I think sometimes we've found, we've put people who may be more of an analyst profile, who are fantastic as analysts, but they might not necessarily be the right sort of profile to engage with senior stakeholders.
Good. I just got a question as well, which I'm not sure what to make of it. What's the best place for data scientists to sit in the organization? Coming from Giselle, I would probably say, like, you need data scientists in many parts of the organization. I don't know whether the panel agrees with this. Giselle also asked whether BI is new in your corporates. She may mean part of BI as part of the Insights organization, maybe. So not 100% clear. Any thoughts on those two questions from anyone?
I think, I mean, on the BI part, like we said earlier, it's really about data processing and understanding all the information sources that are out there. Therefore, a clear cut between insights and analytics, BI, and so on is no longer possible. So therefore, you need to have both skills on both sides. So data without translating them to insights are useless, and insights are very difficult to find without data very often. Therefore, it has to go together. That's why in BI, however you define it, was always part of the wider Insights organization that I was part of. Sometimes, yes, in a kind of a sister function, but very often put together at some point in the organization. And that's also true currently at Colgate-Palmolive, where we have a Chief Insights Analytics Officer. And therefore, that then she oversees both areas. But like I said, I mean, for me, whenever people say, is that an Insights Analytics question, I say, no, that's a question for us. It doesn't matter. Because for me, the wider label for me is insights, because that's what we all strive for. Data analytics and also business insights or business intelligence is just part of that overall insights generation engine.
Very good. Yeah. I have a fascinating question here, which is the best question for the end of today almost. How do Insights orgs measure their success?
Oh, I see we're all off on mute at the same time. Sorry, Paola, you have...
If we survive, we are successful.
Very good.
No, I'm joking, but I think, there is an element of the impact that we're bringing into the organization, which I think is absolutely relevant. Now, we can discuss probably the whole night what is going to be the best KPI to measure the impact. But I believe, in times, especially in times of transformation, like the one we are continuously in, if companies like ours are willing to keep a healthy and sound insights and analytics team, it's a good sign. That's the way I would position it, very simply.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've set up, I mean, we have a sort of an internal survey, kind of an internal NPS, which gives us a constant feedback loop. I mean, we're also using market logic to actually understand the sort of consumption of our insights as well, the sort of engagement level. I have regular personal interactions with our senior executive teams to get the feedback firsthand, have a dialogue with them about how we're doing, also to publicize what we're doing, just to make sure they recognize, but also to get their feedback and to make sure they feel that we're supporting them, that we're on the right track. In the past, I've also tried to apply a concept, I call it sort of a growth kit, which is a key intelligence or a key insight topic. And I've tried to monetize it. So, and I still have this as a bit of a dream, so to speak, because I think you can actually evaluate business problems. You can monetize a business problem. And what I'd love to be able to do is actually claim, well, if we've delivered some insights, has that insight helped us to solve a problem which is quantified of going from X to Y? I think it's almost academic, to be honest, but I still want to show that, you know, insights are an investment, they're not a cost. And I think that's something you have to work very hard at. So we sort of monitor it on both sides. One, it's the service level to get that feedback. You know, are we creating the impact? Is it actionable? Is it objective? You know, how did the sort of service level to make sure we're getting that sort of level of feedback? And at the same time, I'm trying to, partly through dialogue, partly through explaining the worth of some of our insights. You know, if we can get customer retention from X to Y, how many million euros is this worth? You know, that's why you should be looking at your insights team as an investment and not a cost. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's super hard to measure, and there is no return on investment that you can just calculate like in marketing mix modeling on media and so on. That's why I think internal surveys are a good starting point, but I agree also with Stuart that constant feedback with key senior stakeholders is really important. And other than that, I mean, yeah, you can try various things. I think what the Insights organization I was part of did sometimes in the past was that at some point there was the question from senior management saying, okay, we have all these reports, they are not adding any value. And we heard that over and over again in key meetings. And then at some point, the SVP of Insights at that time just said to all of us, okay, let's stop sending any reports. We are not share reports, whatever, as of now, and then see how fast people and who complains. And then it was exactly the same people said, where's my report and that stuff? I can't do my business without this constant kind of feedback. And then we say, okay, here you go. Next time you say it's not adding value, just remember how you felt when you didn't have that information at hand.
Absolutely. So we're coming to the end of our time. I think we had a fascinating discussion touching very many aspects of this question of driving decisions with insights at scale to facilitate and support growth. I think we all agree that this is a worthwhile journey, but it's a journey and it's quite heavy on the change and transformation side. Of course, it has a technology dimension, but nothing that we will be able to in any way fix in the short term. I think we landed on this infinity loop of partnership between the business and the Insights organization as sort of the perpetuum mobile that sort of drives decision making. And I liked your closing thought, Stuart, on maybe we can assess like what the ROI is, for example, based on classifying the types of decisions, their likely value, and the feedback on the decision maker on whether the insight helped, which is probably an interesting job for us as well as Market Logic. So I want to thank particularly our panelists and all of the participants spending time with us today. Thanks for your questions. And it was clear from the beginning that we wouldn't have all of the answers, but surely we will have a dialogue going forward. So thanks to everyone and have a wonderful evening or morning or whatever it is in your respective time zone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Enjoyed the discussion. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.